Okay, we are live on Facebook and recording is on. Welcome to the 8th session of Vedic Hymns for, let me start the video as well. For ages 8 and up. This is the 8th session. In the last session, we covered the 6th verse of the Purusha Suktam. Yat-puru-she havi-sha deva yajna vasanto asya sirajyam grishma yidha sharaddavihi. So we saw how Brahma was doing the yajna, right? Sarvahut yajna. That means the cosmic yajna by which he was creating the Srishti, the universe itself.
And the seasons.
And the seasons. And then we talked about, yeah, you remember very well, right? We talked about why Saraswati is called Sharada, because she's the goddess of Sharadrutu. So Aksharabhyasam, Dasara, all of that stuff happens in the Sharadrutu. And academic year also starts with fall. So we talked about all these things last class, right? So today we'll cover the next sloka, next verse. And that is the 7th verse of the Purusha Suktam. Saptasyasan pari-thaya-ha trisaptas samidha krutaha deva yajnam tanvanaha abadnan purusham pasum. Saptasyasan pari-thaya-ha trisaptas samidha krutaha deva yajnam tanvanaha abadnan purusham pashum. So asya, sapta means what? Sapta asyasan. Sapta is 7, right? Right, sapta is 7. Asya, his or this, right? So asya means this sacrifice. We are talking about sacrifice, right? Purusha Suktam is about the sacrifice or the yajna that Brahma is doing to make the creation, right? The universe. So asya refers to the sacrifice that we are talking about. Sapta is 7. Saptasyasan paridhaya-ha. What is paridha? Paridhaya-ha. Paridhi. What is paridhi?
We knew somebody that was named Paridhi.
Yeah. It's actually a common word in Indian languages, paridhi. So what is paridhi? They are like boundaries, right? In Telugu also you say boundaries. The boundaries that you put for the yajna, right? So there are 7 of them.
So it's a septagon shape?
Yeah, septagon shape. So it's like if you saw homam, right? They put the wooden logs. They are typically 4, but here they are 7. So they are like the fence, right? They cover the homam. Saptasyasan paridhaya trisaptas samidha. Trisapta means
3, 7?
Yeah, 3 times 7.
21.
How much? 21. That's right. So there are 21 samidha. Samidha means what?
Sama is equal. It doesn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah, samidha actually is again a common Indian word for holy procedures and things like that. You
Answer.
yeah,
Samayam.
no. You use what are called as Samidha. For Homam particularly, you use Samidha. Samidha is basically your firewood that you put in the fire. So 21 firewood
So like
brands kind of thing.
incense sticks and stuff.
Yeah, you can, incense sticks and fire. I mean, wood, right? You put wood first.
Oh yeah.
You have to burn the wood first.
Feed the fire.
Yeah. So there are 21 such samidhas. Trisapta samidha krita. What is krita?
Creation.
Right. Create, do, make, things like that, right?
Kara.
Yeah, kara. Deva, yajnam, deva, you know, right? What is deva?
God.
Yeah, gods. Yajnam means?
A yagna is a sacrifice.
Yeah. Yat means that. So that means for the sacrifice. Deva yajnam tanvanaha. What is tanvanaha? So tanvanaha refers to the people who are doing the sacrifice. The person who is doing the sacrifice. So that means deva. As you can see from that sloka, deva yajnam tanvanaha. So the devas are doing the yajna, kind of. The people, I mean, when you go to temple and look at Homa, there are some people surrounding. It's not just the priest, right? There are also some people who actually offer things to the fire. So the devas are like that now.
But isn't this the same yagna that Brahma did to create the seasons?
Yeah, it is Brahma's yajna, but Brahma
He
made
invited
devas sit and he is making them do the yajna.
Not Vishnu, right? Because he's doing the yagna to Vishnu.
Yeah. Brahma is basically from Vishnu, right? That's what we studied in the previous slokas.
Yeah.
Brahma is from Vishnu. So, and Brahma is doing the sacrifice, and the doers, the real doers, are the devas. Deva yajnam tanvanaha abadnan. What is abadnan? Badnam. Bandhan. What is bandhan?
Bond.
Yeah, bond. So abadnan means to be bound, right? Something that is bound. Do you know anything that is bound in Homa?
Sticks.
You don't know. You never watched it. So you wouldn't know. Because it is illegal now in most countries. So in olden days, I'm in Nepal, I think they still do that, but in olden days, there used to be a sacrificial lamb or something like that. So they used to tie that lamb to a post to offer the lamb or whoever. It could be a beast, any animal, any creature.
That's horrible.
They used to offer it to God as part of the Homa.
But that's not theirs to give.
What?
It's not theirs to give, right?
Yeah, it's God's, so they're giving it back to God. So Buddha was against it. Buddha was against it, and so that is one reason people think that Buddha was against Hinduism, but that's not true. Buddha preached Hinduism. In fact, I talked to a Chinese person in Singapore, an old man. He told me that they are Hindus. They consider themselves as Hindus. They are actually Buddhists, but they consider themselves as Hindus. Whatever Buddha preached was basically Hinduism. So, so anyway, so for homas in olden days, they used to tie lambs. So that is one of the reasons they say the Brahmins, the priests in Eastern India, they eat non-vegetarian stuff. They eat food that is not just vegetarian, but they eat chicken and
Wow.
the reason they say is because this priests, these Brahmins used to do yagna, and then the animal that is sacrificed is basically a prasada from the god, right? So they used to cook and eat that prasada. Whatever is offered to the god, they used to partake a little bit of that. So anyway, the point here is that typically for homas, there is a sacrificial animal, sacrificial living creature, typically a lamb. And so abadnan purusham pashum. Abadnan is bound. Pashum is animal, right? Pashu in Indian language, pashu means an animal. So abadnan pashum is understandable, right? The pashu which is tied up.
Mm-hmm.
But how come Purusha is coming here? Abadnan purusham pashum.
Right? Person.
Yeah, Purusha is the god. So how come Purusha is coming here? It means that the animal which is tied to the post is none other than Brahma himself, the Purusha himself, the Virat Purusha. Remember Brahma was called the Virat Purusha in the last sloka. So the animal, the sacrificial animal, which is being used to be sacrificed for this yajna of creation, is Brahma himself. So Brahma is sacrificing himself to create the world, the universe. Right? See, without sacrifice, you cannot get anything, right? No gains without pains, right? So there should be some sacrifice. For every noble cause, particularly, there needs to be a sacrifice. And here the sacrificial lamb, the sacrificial goat, or the sacrificial animal is Brahma himself. So this is all very metaphorical, right? They are using a lot of metaphors. There's no real fire, there's no real Samidhis, there's no real paridhis, right? It's all metaphorical, it's all like similes.
Because it's all being done in Brahma's mind.
Yeah, it's all, but to describe it, they're using a lot of metaphors. The same thing with machine learning, right? Machine learning is also all about metaphors.
Huh.
It's about, remember we talked similarity between points. Everything relates to similarity in machine learning. So that is the reason why the Vedas, the ancient scriptures can be, or the newer phenomena can be derived from the ancient scriptures and ancient thought process. Ancient thought process was based on similes, metaphors, analogies, similarities. That's how machine learning today works, right? So, so this is all conceptual. The whole thing is Purusha Suktam, whatever is described in Purusha Suktam, is very conceptual, very abstract, very metaphorical. So here we are talking about the yajna, the creation yajna. It requires sacrifice, and the sacrificial lamb is the God himself who is creating. So he's basically creating the world from himself, right? So that is the reason why we talked, right? Last time, Brahma is a mortal. He is not going to live forever.
He lives for 100 years, but his one day is way longer.
Yeah, so he's a mortal. So he's sacrificing himself for the Srishti, right? And who is doing the homa?
Brahma.
Brahma,
And
but through the devas, right? And what are the paridhis?
Borders.
The borders. There are 7 borders, right? So what do you think are the borders here? So at that time, there was nothing, right? There was nothing. Nothing was created. So what could be the borders?
I would say the direction, but there are only 4
Yeah,
directions.
good thinking, good thinking. Directions is one answer.
But there are only 4 directions. How
There
could
are only 4 directions. So what about the remaining 3? So it may not be directions then.
I would say planets, but there's only 8 planets. There's over 8 planets.
Yeah.
The devas.
So one thought is that they could be the, when you do homa, you have to chant mantras.
Yeah.
And the mantras have to follow some boundaries, some rules.
Oh.
So you cannot do something different, right? So they need to follow some boundaries. They need to be within certain boundaries. So what are those boundaries? Can you tell me? You are learning music, right? So what are the boundaries for, can you recite anything like, can you do
No,
that?
we
No.
have to sing in pitch.
Right.
And we have to sing it properly, and we can't be goofing off while singing it because that's just disrespectful.
Right. So what is that called? What is the paridhi that you build to sing a song?
Rules.
Rules. Okay. What are those rules called? You've been learning music for so long.
Well, I mean, just respect, isn't it? And like,
When you sing a song, so Annamaya Kritis, what are some of the Kritis that you learn?
Shri Gananadam Bhajare.
Yeah, Sri Gananadam Bhajare. So, what are the boundaries for that song? Which will limit you from going this way, that way?
Well, the swaras. They
Swaras, swaras, right?
Right.
And what do the swaras form?
That's like the swaram of the song. And based on the swaras, you get the sahitya, and then the swara and sahitya together make the entire kriti.
Right. But those swaras follow something, right? There is a paridhi for those swaras also.
Ragam?
Right. Ragam.
Oh, Anushtup Chandra.
Right. Now you get it. Meter. Right? The
Isn't
meter.
meter like talam?
Yeah, the meter is like the raga and tala and bhava. Raga and tala, right? So, so those are the paridhis for your songs. The paridhis for the chants are your meters, the chandas. And you know one chandas, right? What is that chandas?
Anushtup Chandra.
Right, you know Anushtup. Most of the divine, yeah, Vishnu Sahasranama, Lalita Sahasranama, most of the divine stotras are in Anushtup Chandaha. But there are 6 other chandas. So there are 6 other meters. What is the other meter? I think we talked about it previously also in one of the previous, I don't know if it is Bhagavad Gita or this Purusha Suktam, but we talked about the other chandas. The most popular chandas other than Anushtup is Gayatri, right?
Oh, yeah, the 20.
Yeah, so Gayatri is, I think we talked in the context of Purusha Suktam only, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Gayatri is one chandas. Then the other chandas is Trishtup. Trishtup. Then
Does
the
that
other is,
something to do with 3? Or is
yeah,
it called that?
yeah, Trishtup is, it's in 3s. The other is Brihati. Then the other is Pankti, Ushnuk, and Jagati. So those are the 7 chandas or meters. Gayatri, Trishtup, Brihati, Pankti, Ushnuk, Anushtup, and Jagati. So
Are they
those
like
are
the
the
7 main talas? Alankarams?
No, they are not talas, they are chandas. There are 7 different meters in which the Vedas can be chanted. So that is one thought, but then the later verses of Purusha Suktam kind of indicate that that may not be the case. So then what other 7 things are there?
4 directions and then 3 Tridevas. Can they be 2 things combined together?
Yeah, there could, yeah, you're right. So there aren't many 7 things that were created by that time. Even Chandas may not have been created by that time, right? Chandas was, we are not sure if Chandas was even created by that time. So Chandas is ruled out. So maybe it's a combination of multiple things, right? So what could those be?
Navagrahas? Oh, those are 9.
So one thought is the basic elements,
But there are
the
only
5 elements.
Yeah.
The 5 elements, which are earth, water, fire, air, and space. And what are the 6th and 7th ones?
Mind and intelligence. Because Krishna says
Good.
that in the Bhagavad Gita.
Right, you're right. See, your thought process is very good. You remember all that, right? So the 6th could be buddhi, intellect, right? And the 7th could be ahamkara, the ego. Remember we talked about this the very beginning of when we started Vedic Vedas, right? So the 6th could be the buddhi, intellect, and the 7th could be ahankara. Some others interpreted it as the 6th could be day and the 7th could be night. So that's the other thought. I mean, it's left for us to interpret, but
Krishna says that.
yeah, Krishna. I think Krishna says that in one of the slokas that ahankara and buddhi together with the panchabhutas are kind of fundamental. So those could be the 7 paridhis in which the creation happened. The 7 paridhis are the 5 elements and the intellect and the ego in which the creation happened. And it is quite logical, right? Because the entire creation you take is basically composed of the 5 elements and ego and buddhi, right? Do you see any other thing other than these 7 in any creation?
Not really.
See, when people pass away, they just become one with the 5 elements, right? Some cultures bury in the ground, so then the person becomes part of the earth. Some people cremate, that means put the body in the fire, so that then the body becomes one with the fire. Some people leave it to the skies, so they just put the body exposed to the sky, and the vultures eat and all that stuff. But anyway, that's a different matter. So that is like giving the body to the space, allowing it to decay. So that is, some cultures do that.
And then decaying through erosion and stuff would be through
Yeah,
the wind.
yeah, through the wind. So basically, all of us, everything that is created in this universe is within the paridhis of the 5 elements and the buddhi and the ego, right? Buddhi and ego, ahankara and buddhi are the 2 things which is apart, which is aside from the 5 elements which we are comprised of, right? See, can you remove my ego from me when you look at me? No, right? Ego is so integrated into me. The 5 elements plus ego and my intellect also, right? I'm talking today because of my intellect, right? So I'm not different from my intellect. So the 5 elements, the ego and the intellect comprise every person, right? So those are the paridhis those are the boundaries within which Brahma created the universe. Everything in the universe has been created within these boundaries, these 7 boundaries of 5 elements, the buddhi and the ahankara. And then comes the samidhis. Samidhis are the firewoods. So what could be these samidhis?
Well, there are 21 of them. Does that mean that there are 21 things?
Yeah, there are 21 things which have been used for the yajna of creation.
21 devatas?
No, devatas. Devatas are the ones who are doing the yajna. They are being used for the yajna. So they cannot be the samidhis as well, right? So one interpretation is again the 5 elements.
But there are only 5.
There are only 5. So the 5 elements are among the 21. And there are, remember we talked about tanmatras, subtle principles.
Oh, when you were saying the Vedas?
Yeah, when we started, I think the slide is still there. Let me see. Is this the one? Yeah, see these ones. So where is the tanmatras? So jnanendriyas are 5, karmendriyas are 5, so that is 10. Then 5 bhutas, that is 15. Then 5 subtle elements, tanmatras, those are 20. And one could be, which one? Which one could be the one? So we have 20, right?
Purusha?
Yeah, that's right. So we go from the bottom. So the 21 elements which make up the universe are the 5 jnanendriyas plus the 5 karmendriyas. So what are the 5 karmendriyas? The mouth, the ear, and all that stuff, right? And these are cognitive senses associated with those karmendriyas, right? So the neural network. They are the neural networks which help you actually perceive through the karmendriyas. So 5 jnanendriyas, 5 karmendriyas, 10, then 5 panchabhutas from which we are made, that is 15, and 5 tanmatras, right? So those are 20. So they are the subtle aspects, right? So what exactly are tanmatras? So I think they are born out of the ahankara, maybe. I don't exactly remember, but I'm trying to recollect, but yeah, not very sure. So anyway, so those are the basic ingredients of the creation, right? The jnanendriyas, the panchendriyas, I mean the karmendriyas, the panchabhutas, and the tanmatras. So tanmatra, anyway, we can check, right? We can check the internet. What are tanmatras? See tanmatras. Rudimentary or subtle elements. See the act of creation. That's how they come into picture. Process of creation. They are used for. They are ingredients for creation. And what does it say? It calls the ultimate truth analysis. 5 senses. Purusha and Prakriti are non-evaluates. So 7 dhatus, 5 gross elements, Chetana or Purusha, and Prakriti. So those are the 7. 24 categories of elementary substances. So the manas, okay, let me check. The 5 tanmatras corresponding to the 5 sense perceptions and 5 sense organs. Tanmatras combine and recombine in different ways to produce the gross elements, which make up the gross universe perceived by the senses. The senses play their part in coming. So it's like meta elements. They are generative elements. So in deep learning, we have what are called as generative models, right?
Models that generate
Stuff.
more models?
Yeah, remember we talked about generative adversarial networks where they could create faces, real looking faces.
Using the generator and discriminator.
Yeah. So it's something like that. You can think of tanmatras like that. So they are subtler, much more subtler than gross things like the 5 panchabhutas or the 5 karmendriyas. You can feel the nose, you can feel the mouth. Tanmatras are more subtler in nature, but pertaining to the same 5 aspects. So those are the 20. And where were we? We were here. Yeah. So, so the 5 karmendriyas, the 5 tanmatras, the 5 jnanendriyas, and and then there is prakriti, right? You said prakriti, yeah. So the 21st one is a prakriti itself. So those are the 21 elements which are used as samidhis, the firewood for this yajna.
I have a question. Why did they write Trisapta instead of
Ekavimshati. Yeah. You can refer in multiple ways, right? Here we are talking in 7s. So sapta syasan, we started with the 7. So it makes more sense to use 7 word. So remember the meter. You have to be poetic, right? When you are a poet, you will understand this much better. You have to follow a meter, which makes pleasing sounds, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that is the reason why they may have used 7 again here. So that is the idea. And who is the sacrificial lamb here?
Brahma.
The God himself, the Virat Purusha, the Brahma himself is the sacrificial lamb. He is sacrificing himself to create the universe, because without sacrifice, there's nothing that you can gain. You have to sacrifice something to gain something else. So that is the sloka. So this is, we are looking at the very basic processes, right? And it's all described in metaphors, right? So these ideas are very similar to machine learning, right? The ideas that we talked in machine learning, right? The concept of similarities, metaphors. See, we talked about similarity, right? So, so if you again, let us go to this support vector machines.
That's how it makes conclusion. It's by finding the similar and different points.
We talked about the nearest neighbors. Remember?
Yeah,
So,
KNN.
yeah, KNN, that's right. K nearest neighbors. So nearest neighbors is basically similarity, right? How similar one point is to the other. So if these are all people, some men and some women, based on the height and weight, for instance, the blue ones could be men and the green ones could be women, right? That's what we talk. So how do you differentiate between the blue and the green points here? Based on the distance. And what is distance? Basically similarity.
Yeah.
What does the distance measure? It's the similarity, right? So entire machine learning is based on metaphors and similarities, analogies, and things like that. So just like our ancient scriptures. The ancient scripture is completely metaphorical, right? Whatever we studied today, the sloka is entirely metaphorical. There's nothing real that is happening here. There's no fire, there's no wood, there's no paridhis, there's no real lamb which is being sacrificed. It's all conceptual, it's all metaphors, right? So the same thing in machine learning. And in fact, the deeper you go into machine learning, the more you will realize this. For instance, we talked about neural networks last time, right? Remember neural networks? They are the key elements behind your top applications. Like we talked about generative adversarial networks, right? So what are generative adversarial networks? They are basically neural networks. They're all neurons. So how does a neural network work? The fundamental neuron is called the perceptron, right? We talked about perceptron, do you remember? So these are all the inputs. So a number of inputs. This could be from the ear, this could be from the nose, this could be from the mouth, and so on and so forth, right? So you are making cookies, right? So when the thought of cookies will start a smell sense in your nose. Then your mouth starts watering, your tongue starts watering. So that is the other input. And the third input is the sound of the mic. What is it called? Oven, right? Tongue, the bell. It rings a bell or something, right? When it's time. So the preheating is done. There's a bell that chimes. So all these things, all these inputs are taken together into the brain, and your brain will sum those signals up. Right? This Greek symbol is what?
Z?
Sigma,
Oh,
S. It looks like S, right? It looks almost like S.
Yeah, that's kind of backwards.
Yeah, kind of backwards. So this is sigma. Sigma stands for summation. So if these are discrete like this, you use sigma. But if they're continuous, suppose things are coming continuously to you. So these are all discrete, right? So there's nose, there's mouth, there's ears and all that. They are all discrete. Suppose something is sending a signal continuously. So then to some continuous signals, you actually use what is called as integral in calculus.
We're learning basically the same thing about functions and continuous and discrete functions.
Right. So if the function is discrete, then you use this symbol, the Greek symbol for S. If the function is continuous, you use the letter S itself in English. So if you look at the symbol for integration, integral, images. See, this is an integral. This is a definite integral. A definite integral has limits. So there's an upper limit and there's a lower limit. Right? So this looks like S, right? Elongated S. So if it is continuous, then you have this elongated S. And if it is discrete, you have the Greek letter S, sigma, standing for sigma. So the brain or the neuron tries to sum all these inputs up, but with some weights, right? So not every signal is taken with the same weight. Not every signal is equally important, right? For instance, there's all these cookie things happening in the house, but suppose you hear a cry from outside, a very loud cry.
That immediately grabs all your attention.
Exactly. So the weight for that input will be the highest, right? So you need to combine the senses with the weights, right? So that is what is happening here. You multiply the inputs, which are xi, with their weights, and then you sum them up. But there is a bias in your mind, like you're more biased. towards the people shouting outside, maybe, because it's life-threatening, could be, right? So there's a bias already in your mind. So you have to add that bias as well. So that is what happens in a neuron, in a simple neuron called perceptron. So now all the signals are summed up. Now, do you have to really pay attention to the signals or no? You're studying. Tomorrow you have exams, a very important exam. And then the cookie is baking in the oven. And all these senses are playing up. Your mouth is watering, your nose is smelling the nice cookie. But do you have to pay attention to that? How do you decide? You decide using a step function. What is this called as a step function? So either you pay attention to all these signals or you don't pay attention to all these signals. So either it is a 0 or a 1 based on a threshold. So if this sum, this whole sum is greater than some number, then you pay attention. If this whole sum is less than that number, called threshold. What is threshold?
Like a line of order.
Right. In India, every home has threshold. I mean, at least it's ancient. Yeah. And those thresholds used to be covered with turmeric, pasupu. Right? Why? Because it is antiseptic. No bacteria, no virus comes inside. So every door used to have a threshold, and all those thresholds used to be covered with turmeric. But today, the concept is still there. The door borders are painted yellow, at least at the bottom. But turmeric is no longer being, they're painted. The turmeric is no longer.
What's the point?
Yeah, that's it's symbolic. It's more symbolic today, that we want to drive away the bacteria, the virus, and all that stuff. Anyway, that is the threshold, right? So you cross the threshold. If the signal crosses a threshold, it will trigger. Otherwise, it will just be dumped. It will be ignored, right? So that is how even machine learning neural network works. So this simple scheme is called perceptron. So where the inputs are all combined with the weights, summed up, and then based on a threshold, they are either triggered or ignored. See, so that's why perceptron is a device that makes decisions by weighing up the evidence. So this is all the evidence.
So they just add everything.
Yeah, they just add everything after multiplying with the weights.
So it's kind of like it's making a pros and cons list and then adding weights to each pro and con and then adding it up.
Yeah.
Deciding if it wins or not.
Yeah. So bias is basically a measure to see how easy it is to get the perceptron to output a 1, right? The bias can lower the threshold, right? So because bias is added up to the weights, it is actually lowering in effect, it is lowering the threshold. The more bias, suppose you are more biased towards the cookies than the exams, then you might forget about the exams and then wait for the cookies and celebrate the cookies, right? So that's the thing. So that is a perceptron, right? This is the simplest. Neural network, right? And so when you apply this perceptron to a boundary like we saw in support vector machines, see, we saw support vector machines, right? Anyway, that's not showing up. So suppose there are a number of cookie related features, and there is your exam related things. So what is this activation function doing? It is basically drawing a line between the two, right? Which one to choose?
Yeah, it's like
Yeah, so if your signal is greater, then you might choose the
One
yeah,
option.
so one or the other, right? So it is basically drawing a straight line, right? It is drawing a straight line. So, but remember, there are some problems which are not linearly separable, right? For instance, you take this one. So this is the XOR gate. Remember, we talked about XOR gate. So when x1 is 0 and x2 is 0, the output of XOR is -1, right? 1 and 0, it is 1. It should be exclusive OR. So either this should be 1 or this should be 1.
And then it becomes one. On the
Yeah,
right
then
side.
it becomes 1. If both are 1s or both are 0s, then it is a -1. So that is what is the exclusive OR. So if you plot it on a graph, it will look like this. So what does the plus represent here? So what are the classes?
Like the axes.
No, the classes. Each point belongs to a class, right? Here. We want to
0
separate.
or 1.
So the inputs are 0 or 1, but the outputs are -1 or 1, right? So the two classes are -1 or 1. So based on the inputs, the output could be -1 or it could be +1, right? So either you could be working on your exams or you could be enjoying your holiday with cookies, right? So, but unfortunately, this is not linear. Why is it not linear? You will know when you plot it on this graph. So when you plot it on the graph, the graph looks like this. And can you draw a single line to separate the pluses and the minuses and the zeros?
No, yeah.
Because you need at least two lines, right? Like this and this, or this and this, right? So, I mean, based on this table, this graph has been drawn based on the table. So can you tell me what is plus here? Is it -1 or +1?
It's +1.
So when x1 is 0 and x2 is 1,
It's 1.
there's a plus. So there's a plus. It's a +1, right? So plus is for +1 and 0, the circle is for -1. See, when x1 is 0 and x2 is also 0, there's a circle there. So it is a -1. So if you plot these points, you will get a plot like this. And obviously you cannot separate it using a single line. So either it has to be curved, something like this, or it has to be two straight lines. So we know that this one draws a single straight line, right? So how can we draw two straight lines now using the same thing, using this kind of a thing?
If those are the only values, you can draw one straight line on one side of the two x's and then draw another straight line on the other side of the two x's.
Right.
And same with the zeros.
So that means you need two networks like this. One network will produce a line probably like this, and the other network will produce a line probably like this, right? So that is exactly what we do. It's called multi-layer neural network. So when there are multiple layers now, instead of just one layer, you have multiple layers. So the input x1, x2 is passed to the input layer. Then there is what is called as a hidden layer. Why is it hidden? Because it is between input and output, and you only see inputs. Yeah. Can you see what happens in your mind? No, right? It's all hidden. Yeah, you just come up with the answer. That's why it's all hidden. That's why it's called hidden layer. So this hidden layer, the inputs are passed to hidden layer. So there are two neurons in the hidden layer. The first neuron will produce the red line, and the second neuron, N4, produces the blue line, right? So now you can see that the 2 points can be separated, the 4 points can be separated from the class, the two classes can be separated, right? So that is the idea of neural networks. So you want 4 lines, Suppose that some other points are somewhere, maybe there's a point in the center or something.
Then you can do the same thing on the other
Yeah,
side.
you have to draw the lines like this. So, so you can do that. So the idea is to introduce a hidden layer of perceptrons for linear combinations, which will produce a linear combination. So for instance, so this is hidden. This is the classes, the two classes. The one is a pink class and the other is a green class, right? So this is obviously not a linearly separable.
Yeah.
You cannot draw a single line to separate the points. So, but you can draw multiple straight lines to separate this out. So if you use 3 hidden neurons, you'll be able to draw 1, 2, and probably 3 or
The one
something
is
like
kind
that.
of diagonal.
Yeah. And this one you can draw 6 lines, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 or something like that. And even complicated boundaries, you can draw 20 hidden neurons.
Then you get the most accurate.
Yeah. So you get all this. So you can combine. So that way you can use any number of layers to come up with any kind of boundary like this. So that is the reason why this neural network architecture is called a universal approximator. So that means it can approximate any function.
What?
Okay? So any mathematical function can be approximated. It is not exact. It is just approximated using neural networks, right? So that is called universal approximator theorem. That is the reason why neural networks are so powerful. You can do anything. I mean, you are able to create faces, real life looking faces based
So
on neural networks.
having more neurons is having like double and triple checks almost,
Yeah,
or like having
paridhis. We talked about paridhis, right? So these boundaries are like paridhis. The more neurons you add, the more hidden layers you add, the more paridhis you can come up with. See how it is related to the Vedas? So these are basically paridhis. Each of the hidden layer produces a paridhi, right? So that is why it's called a universal function approximator. Just 2 layers is enough, but only thing is you need a lot of neurons in the hidden layer. If the paridhis are very complicated. If the paridhi is just a straight line, just one, you don't even need a hidden layer, right? If the paridhi is multiple twisted lines, then it has to be, you may have to add a number of neurons.
so for the same example, instead of 20 hidden neurons, if they had like 1 hidden neuron for every dot, each dot would have its own private little circle around it. And
Yeah, that's right. If you want each point to be separated out, then yeah, you may have to add as many neurons. May not be the exact, it will be much less than the actual data points, but you'll have to add a lot more neurons. It all depends on the number of lines you need, the paridhis you need. The more the paridhis you need, the more neurons you need to add. See, for instance, take this example. So that example, this kind of a paridhi can be obtained by multiple paridhis, right? So this is the first paridhi, this is the second paridhi. Combine the 2 paridhis and combine more paridhis. You get something like this, right? So what is happening is the first neuron is creating this kind of a paridhi. The second neuron is creating this kind of a paridhi. This is in the hidden layer. And when you combine them together, you are able to get a paridhi like this, boundary like this. Now, if for more complicated paridhis like this one, see, this is a completely different paridhi. So you need more neurons. So so what is the analogy here? So each neuron is doing some function, right? So each of these neurons are working together to produce this kind of a paridhi. So this line is this one, this line is this one, and this line is this one, right? So does that look like something familiar?
Looks like
So these are being used as building blocks, right? So there's one building block, this other building block, there's a third building block. You put all of them together, one over the other, you get this kind of a block, right? So another example, can you think of any other example where this kind of thing happens?
to cut something out of a picture or something, you'd erase everything around it, like draw several other lines. So you only have what you need. Maybe.
Yeah, that is one thing. But see, you have to understand that each neuron is working with the other neurons discretely, but together they are accomplishing a function. Is that a concept familiar to you?
Teamwork?
Teamwork, exactly, right? Office, organization. So each person in an organization does something like this. And all of them, all of their work put together will result in a nice, eventual, useful information, right? Useful function. That is exactly what is happening in neural networks. So that is the idea of neural networks. So if you want more complicated functions, you can add more and more layers. Here there are two hidden layers. So if it is more than 3 hidden layers, then it is called a deep neural network, deep learning. Instead of machine learning, it becomes deep learning.
Because it does really
Deep.
deep.
Yeah. Because from input to output, there are many layers, right? So it is deep.
Instead of doing 2 hidden layers with 4 lines each, couldn't they do 1 hidden layer with 8 lines or borders?
Yeah, that could be done too. That's right.
Would it make a difference? If it's
This is more efficient, right? You can think
so you can process it one at a time.
Yeah, you can process one at a time. And the other thing is it's much more sensible to visualize the working, and instead of jacking up one up on the other, all the neurons, you can distribute them in layers, right? So 2 layers works like this. So you can produce even more complicated boundaries. Okay, next time when we get a chance, we are going to look at a playground. It's a playground with which you can play. You can actually play with deep learning networks. We can do fun stuff using, or I can, but anyway, it's almost time. So anyway, let us end the session here with our prayer. And next time we'll talk, we'll do some experiments with the playground. We can do some fun stuff. Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amrutangamaya Om Shanti 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 Sarve Jana Sukhino Bhavantu Samasta Sanmangalani Santu Shubham